My wife and my best friend think I'm an idiot who works too much. They don't know that I turned our smart home into a surveillance trap. I'm 31 years old, and my wife Deborah is 29. We've been married for 6 years. We were always the relationship goals couple of our social circle. I'm a software engineer and work from home most of the time, while Deborah is an architect at a prestigious firm. Everything started falling apart 4 months ago. Deborah started having construction site meetings that lasted until 10 p.m. She would come home smelling like a men's cologne I knew all too well, the expensive citrus scent that my best friend Rodrigo wears. Rodrigo has been my friend since college. He was the best man at my wedding. He was at our house at least 3 times a week for barbecues and games. I'm not the type to make a scene without proof. Since I work with automation, I installed the entire security system in our house myself. One day, while Deborah claimed she was stuck at the office, I noticed that her car's GPS, which is linked to our home server to open the gate automatically, wasn't downtown. It was at a boutique hotel 20 minutes from here. Rodrigo's car was also there, according to the Find My Friends app that he forgot he was still sharing with me since a trip we took to the beach. Instead of confronting them, I decided to watch. I installed a hidden camera disguised as a simple smoke sensor in our guest room where Rodrigo usually takes a nap after barbecues when he drinks too much. What I saw in that first recording destroyed every ounce of respect I had for them. They weren't just having an affair, they were laughing at me. In the recordings, Deborah said, "Lucas is so focused on his code that he wouldn't see an elephant in the room." And Rodrigo replied, "Better that way. He pays the bills and we have fun." But the worst part came later. I discovered that Rodrigo was going through serious financial trouble, and Deborah was siphoning money from our joint account, money we were saving for our first IVF treatment to pay off his gambling debts. She gave him over $50,000 in the last 3 months. That was the moment my grief turned into pure ice. I wasn't just going to ask for a divorce. I was going to make sure that when I was done, they had nothing but each other and a mountain of problems. I spent the last 6 weeks being the perfect husband. I cooked dinners, bought flowers, and even encouraged Rodrigo to come over more often. Meanwhile, I was moving every cent from my individual accounts to offshore accounts in the name of a trust fund managed by my sister. Legally, the money disappeared into high-risk investments that I can prove went wrong. The grand finale is set for next Saturday. It's Deborah's 30th birthday. She thinks I'm organizing a luxury surprise party in a rented hall for 100 people. She even chose a $3,000 dress that I kindly paid for. What she doesn't know is that the invitations I sent to her family, to her bosses at the architecture firm, and to Rodrigo's conservative parents aren't just for a party. On the big screen where a slideshow of our travel photos was supposed to play, I prepared a special edit. It starts with our wedding, but the last 5 minutes are the videos from the guest room and the screenshots of the bank transfers she made to him. Today is Thursday. Deborah just left for another night meeting. She gave me a kiss on the cheek and said she loved me. Rodrigo sent me a message asking if I needed help with the drinks for the party. I replied, "Don't worry about it, Rodrigo. It's going to be a night no one will ever forget." Friday was the longest day of my life. Seeing Deborah come home with that glow in her eyes, acting like the most dedicated wife in the world, tested every bit of my self-control. She spent the night talking about how excited she was for her 30th birthday and how lucky she felt to have a husband who cared so much. "You are my safe harbor, Lucas," she said, while I pretended to read a report on my tablet. I just smiled and replied, "The wait will be worth it, Deborah. Tomorrow will be the start of a new phase in our lives." She didn't even suspect the double meaning. The banquet hall was flawless. I chose one of the most expensive places in the city, the kind of place her boss, Dr. Arnaldo, usually frequents. I wanted the impact to be professional as well. Dr. Arnaldo is an old-school man, extremely conservative about ethics and character. If he found out that one of his senior architects was embezzling personal funds and acting in bad faith, her career at that firm would be over before dessert. The guests started to arrive. Deborah's parents, who always treated me like a son, were radiant. On the other side, Rodrigo's parents, deeply religious people who see their son as a model of virtue, were chatting happily with my in-laws. Rodrigo arrived last, wearing the suit I helped him pick out. He came up to me, gave me a pat on the back, and whispered, "You did good, man. She looks beautiful. You're the best friend a man could have." I just held my glass of whiskey tighter and nodded. Deborah was in the center of the room, surrounded by friends, laughing and showing off the diamond ring she thought I had bought to celebrate the date. I asked for silence on the microphone. The lights dimmed. "Good evening, everyone," I began, with a voice firmer than I expected. "As you all know, Deborah is turning 30. It's been 6 years of marriage and a lot of history. I prepared something special so that everyone can see the depth of our connection and the surprises we've experienced in recent months." Deborah blew me a kiss, her eyes shining with anticipation. Rodrigo leaned against the side wall near the dessert table with a smug smile on his face. The video started. The first 2 minutes were what everyone expected. Travel photos, our wedding, videos of her laughing on the beach, soft music in the background. I saw her parents wiping away tears. But then the music stopped abruptly. The screen went black for 2 seconds. A date appeared in the top corner, October 14th, 2:15 p.m. The image that appeared wasn't a beach. It was the high-angle shot of our guest room. The quality of the 4K camera I installed was so sharp that you could see the expressions on Rodrigo's face as he entered the room, followed by Deborah. The hall, which had been full of cheerful murmurs, fell into a silence so heavy you could hear her father's heavy breathing in the front row. In the video, they weren't just kissing. They were sitting on the bed, and Deborah's voice came through the hall's speakers perfectly clear. "Lucas already transferred the money from the baby fund to the joint account. I'm going to send the $15K to your betting account tomorrow." He's such a sucker. He thinks we're researching clinics in Miami. Rodrigo laughed in the video, the same laugh he had given me just minutes before at the party. "He works so hard to support us, doesn't he? I'm grateful to my best friend every day." I didn't look at the screen. I looked at them. Deborah froze, the champagne glass trembling in her hand until it shattered on the marble floor. Her face went from pink to a deathly gray in seconds. Rodrigo tried to bolt for the exit, but 2 of my cousins, who were already in on the plan and strategically positioned, blocked the door, casual but firm. The video kept playing. It showed bank statements overlaid with footage of them at the boutique hotel. It showed the moment they joked about my family being inferior because we didn't have the same social status as hers. Dr. Arnaldo, her boss, stood up from his table without saying a single word. He looked at Deborah with a level of contempt I've never seen in another human being and walked out of the hall. Rodrigo's parents were in absolute shock. His mother looked like she was about to faint, while his father stared at his son as if he were looking at a monster. I turned off the microphone, stepped down from the stage, and walked calmly toward Deborah, who was hyperventilating in the middle of the room, with the eyes of 100 people pinned on her like knives. I leaned into her ear and said, low enough so only she could hear, "The party's over, Deborah, and your bags are already on the sidewalk at Rodrigo's apartment complex. I hope that $50K was worth it because it's the last cent you'll ever see from me." I turned my back to leave, but Rodrigo, in an act of desperation and stupidity, screamed my name and lunged at me, his face red with rage and shame. He charged at me, His face transformed into a mask of fury. He was screaming something about me being a traitor to our friendship, which was almost comically ironic. Before he could touch me, my cousins moved with surgical precision. One grabbed him by the chest, while the other placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent pressure that said, "Don't even try it." "You spied on me inside my own house," Rodrigo bellowed, his voice cracking, tears of anger starting to flow. "That's a crime, Lucas! You're going to jail for this!" I stopped, looked at him over my shoulder, and smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first one I'd felt in months. A crime, Rodrigo? I was protecting my assets. Besides, the guest room is legally part of my home office for tax purposes. The security monitoring sign is right there by the front door. You were just too busy with my wife to read it. Chaos took over the rest of the hall. Rodrigo's mother, Donna Adet, a woman who never left home without her rosary, fell to her knees near the buffet table. She was sobbing audibly, hiding her face in her hands. His father, Mr. Geraldo, didn't say a word. He walked up to his son, who was still being held by my cousins, and slapped him so hard the sound echoed through the now silent room. "You are no son of mine," Mr. Geraldo said, his voice trembling with disgust. "You are a thief and an adulterer. Don't you dare come back to my house." He took his wife by the arm, lifted her up, and walked out of the hall without looking back. Meanwhile, Deborah's father, Mr. Marcos, was in a different kind of shock. He approached me, his eyes bloodshot. He had always taken pride in the family lineage and the impeccable upbringing he gave his daughter. "Lucas, my son, please tell me this is some kind of sick joke. Tell me these videos are edited." I looked at the man I once respected. "I wish they were, Marcos, but the $50,000 that left our account for Rodrigo's gambling debts are very real, and the fertility tests I took on my own, which prove I am perfectly capable of having children, are real too. Deborah was taking birth control behind my back while making me spend a fortune on IVF consultations." Mr. Marcos looked at his daughter, who was still on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled champagne. He didn't help her up. He just shook his head and walked away, as if she were a piece of trash he'd found on the sidewalk. Deborah finally managed to stand. Her $3,000 dress was stained, and one of her heels had snapped. She tried to approach a group of work friends, but they recoiled as if she had a contagious disease. Dr. Arnaldo was already gone, but his assistant, Mariana, was still there, recording everything on her phone. "Mariana, please," Deborah implored, her voice hoarse. "Tell Arnaldo I can explain. It was a moment of weakness." Mariana put her phone away and gave her a cold smile. "Arnaldo hates 3 things, Deborah: lies, lack of character, and bad publicity. You just gave him all 3 on a silver platter. I wouldn't show up at the office on Monday if I were you. HR will have already blocked your access." I walked toward the exit, feeling the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders. But before crossing the door, I stopped at the sound booth. I grabbed one last brown envelope hidden there and handed it to Rodrigo, who was now free but looked like a broken man, sitting on a plastic chair. In the icy silence of the hotel suite, the sound of ice cracking in my whiskey glass was the only soundtrack. I picked up the phone and dialed Bruno, Rodrigo's older brother. Bruno was always the black sheep in his parents' eyes, simply because he refused to kiss the ground Rodrigo walked on. "I saw what you did," Bruno said, as soon as he answered. He didn't sound surprised. "The internet in our town is already exploding. Someone leaked the video of the party. Rodrigo is hiding at your ex-wife's place right now, and they're both in a total panic." "I figured," I replied calmly, "but I know you have what I need to bury Rodrigo for good. You always said he had a golden secret about your great-aunt's inheritance." There was silence on the other end. Bruno took a deep breath. "Lucas, Rodrigo didn't just lose money gambling. He used my father's name as a cosigner on a loan shark debt to cover his initial losses 2 years ago. He forged the old man's signature. If the loan shark doesn't get paid by the end of the month, and now that he lost access to your wife's money, my father is going to lose his house, and Rodrigo knows it." I felt a chill. My best friend's malice was deeper than I imagined. He was willing to leave his own parents on the street to maintain his vice and luxury. Sunday, 8 a.m., I woke up to 114 missed calls. Deborah wasn't giving up. When I finally answered, her voice wasn't full of regret, but pure venom.
"You think you won, Lucas? You think you can humiliate me like this and get away with it?" she screamed, with forced sobs in the background. "I've already talked to a lawyer. What you did was illegal exposure, a crime against my honor. I'm going to claim you were an abusive, controlling husband who installed cameras to psychologically torture me. I'm going to take every cent from that software company of yours." "Interesting strategy, Deborah," I said, keeping my voice monotone. "The problem is, while you were screaming on the phone, my lawyer was already filing a criminal complaint for romantic swindling and financial fraud. I have recordings of you admitting you were using me for money. And about the cameras, I have the system logs showing that you accessed them several times in the past to spy on the cleaning staff. You knew they existed. You just forgot where they were hidden." There was a sudden silence. Her bluff had hit a wall. "Lucas, please," she shifted to a desperate whisper. "We were going to have a child. We had plans." "No, Deborah. I had plans. You had an ATM and a lover. Oh, and before I forget, Dr. Arnaldo, your ex-boss, called me. He found irregularities in 2 projects you signed last month. It looks like you overbilled for materials to funnel money to Rodrigo. He's opening an audit tomorrow morning. You won't just lose your job, you'll lose your license." I heard the sound of her phone hitting the floor. I didn't feel pity. I felt surgical satisfaction. I went to our old apartment to grab some confidential documents from the safe. I knew she'd be there. When I opened the door, the scene was pathetic. Rodrigo was sitting on my sofa with a bruise on his face and a cheap bottle of gin in his hand. Deborah's face was swollen from crying as she tried to stuff clothes into trash bags. Rodrigo stood up, staggering. "You destroyed everything, you bastard! My family hates me! I have nowhere to live!" "Funny you should mention family," I said, tossing a file folder on the coffee table. "Bruno told me about the loan shark and your father's forged signature. I already contacted the creditor. I bought your debt, Rodrigo. Now you don't owe an anonymous loan shark. You owe me, and I'm going to execute every guarantee, including that sports car you love so much and your share of your parents' future inheritance." Rodrigo turned pale. "You can't be this cold." "I learned from the best," I replied, looking at Deborah. She stepped toward me, her eyes bloodshot. "You think you're better than us? You lured us to that party. You planned every detail of our ruin." "I just held up the mirror, Deborah. You just didn't like what you saw reflected." I walked to the safe, took what I needed, and before leaving, I looked at them. They looked small. Without my money, without the status of my home, they were just 2 pathetic traders sharing trash bags in a luxury room that no longer belonged to them.
The moving truck arrives in 2 hours for the furniture. Everything in this house was bought with money I proved was part of my premarital inheritance. If you're still here when they arrive, the police will be called for trespassing." As I reached the door, Deborah's father, Mr. Marcos, was walking in. He looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. He didn't even look at his daughter. He came straight to me. "Lucas, we need to talk about my family's company," he said, his voice breaking. "The audit you mentioned, it found that Deborah wasn't acting alone. Rodrigo was using privileged information from my office to benefit a competitor." My eyebrow shot up. This was new. The betrayal was a black hole that kept sucking more people in. Mr. Marcos handed me a tablet with teary eyes. "They didn't just betray me as family, Lucas. They tried to destroy my life's work." The internal investigation confirmed my suspicions. Rodrigo, using remote access credentials Deborah lent him, was selling confidential blueprints and supplier lists to Mr. Marcos's biggest competitor. The money Deborah siphoned from our account was just the tip of the iceberg. They were setting up an industrial espionage scheme to collect a success fee when her father's firm went bankrupt. I didn't wait for Monday. With the help of Mr. Marcos and my lawyer, we called the police that same afternoon, while the two of them were still packing the remains of their dignity. The scene was like something out of a movie. Deborah and Rodrigo were screaming at each other in the hallway when the police stepped off the elevator. "Deborah and Rodrigo, you're under arrest for grand larceny, financial fraud, and violation of trade secrets." Deborah collapsed, falling to her knees and begging her father, "Dad, please, Rodrigo made me do it. He said we'd be rich on our own." Mr. Marcos just looked at her with a coldness that gave me chills. "I don't have a daughter anymore, Deborah. You didn't just rob my son-in-law, you tried to destroy the livelihoods of hundreds of employees who depend on my company. Good luck in your cell." Rodrigo tried to resist, but ended up handcuffed and taken into custody, still screaming that I'd pay for this. I just stood at the door, watching them be led away in silence. The dust settled, but the trail of destruction they left was immense. However, for me, it was fertilizer for something new. Financial justice. Since Rodrigo couldn't pay the debt I bought, I executed the guarantee. Legally, I now own 50% of his parents' house, which I rented to Bruno for a symbolic amount to ensure Rodrigo's parents have a place to live, but on my terms. The downfall. Deborah and Rodrigo were convicted. She lost her professional architecture license and is serving time in a halfway house after a plea deal where she gave up everyone else involved in the espionage ring. Rodrigo remains in prison with no one in his corner. The rebuild. I became Mr. Marcos's business partner. I used my tech expertise to shield his company and modernize their processes. The firm has never been more profitable. But the best part? Mr. Marcos and I developed a real friendship based on respect, not appearances. Today, I live in a new house. No hidden cameras, no fake smoke sensors, just large windows and lots of light. Recently, I received a letter from Deborah from prison. She claimed she had changed, that she missed our perfect life, and that Rodrigo had manipulated her. I didn't finish reading it. I used the letter to light the fireplace while sharing a glass of wine with someone I met 2 months ago, a woman who doesn't know how much I make and likes me simply for my company. They say the best revenge is living well, but I'll be honest with you, seeing their faces when the handcuffs clicked shut was a wonderful bonus. The Lucas who was too focused on code to see an elephant in the room is gone. The new Lucas sees everything, and he's never been happier.